In November 1095, at the Council of Clermont in France, Pope Urban issued his famous call to arms, encouraging Christians to take up the cross and embark on a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem and other sacred lands from Muslim control. During the 11th century, a new and powerful force, the Seljuk Turks, emerged within the Islamic world. Originally nomadic tribes from Central Asia, they converted to Islam and established themselves as the dominant power in the Middle East after a series of military victories. By the late 11th century, the Seljuk Turks had expanded their empire westward, capturing Baghdad in 1055 and taking control of large parts of the Byzantine Empire after their victory at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. As a result of these developments, Emperor Alexios of Constantinople sought help from the West. Europe responded, gathering one of the largest armies of the time, consisting of 70,000 knights and soldiers from all over Europe. The crusade was led by some of the most powerful nobles of France, many of whom left everything behind, including two of France's most important leaders at the time, Adhémar of La Paix and Raymond IV, Count of Toulouse. The armies arrived in Constantinople with little food and expected provisions and help from Alexios. The Crusaders may have hoped for Alexios to lead them, but he was mainly focused on transporting them into Asia as quickly as possible in exchange for food and supplies. Alexios requested the leaders to swear fealty to him and promised to return any land recovered from the Turks to the Byzantine Empire. Godfrey was the first to take the oath, and almost all the other leaders followed suit. Before ensuring that the various armies were transported across the Bosporus, Alexios advised the leaders on how best to deal with the Seljuk armies they would soon encounter. The Crusader army crossed into Asia in the first half of 1097, with their first target being Nicaea, a city that had once been under Byzantine rule, but had become the capital of the Seljuk Sultanate. Upon the Crusaders' arrival on May 14, 1097, the city was besieged. Kilij Arslan, the Sultan of the Seljuks, gathered an army to lift the siege. On May 16, his force attacked a Crusader army, but was driven back by the unexpectedly large Crusader force, suffering heavy losses on both sides. The siege continued, and the Turkish garrison finally surrendered on June 18. There was some discontent among the Franks, who were forbidden from looting the city, but this was eased by Alexios financially rewarding the Crusaders. At the end of June, the Crusaders marched through Anatolia, accompanied by some Byzantine troops under Tatikios, still hoping that Alexios would send a full Byzantine army to support them. They divided the army into two more manageable groups, one led by the Normans and the other by the French, intending to meet again at Dorylaeum. However, on July 1, the Normans, who had marched ahead, were attacked by Kilij Arslan. The Normans formed a tight defensive formation around their equipment and non-combatants and sent for help from the other group. With his army of horse archers, Arslan began surrounding the Crusader position, constantly harassing them. Soon after, the French arrived, and the Turks, who had expected to destroy the Normans, fled rather than face the combined Crusader army. From that point on, the Crusaders' march through Anatolia was unopposed, though the journey was unpleasant, as Arslan had burned and destroyed everything he left behind. It was the middle of summer, and the Crusaders had very little food and water, leading to many men and horses dying. The Crusaders looted and pillaged whenever the opportunity arose, and the individual leaders continued to dispute overall leadership, although none were powerful enough to take command on their own. The Crusader army marched on to Antioch, situated midway between Constantinople and Jerusalem. Antioch was extensive and heavily fortified, and the Crusaders found the idea of taking the city by assault discouraging. Thus, they began a siege on October 20, 1097. Antioch was so large that the Crusaders did not have enough troops to fully surround it, allowing it to stay partially supplied until January. The 8-month attritional siege led to hundreds, or possibly thousands, of Crusaders dying of starvation. In March, a small English fleet arrived with supplies and renewed foraging systems, easing the situation. Meanwhile, Kilij Arslan, a Seljuk Turk commander, raised a coalition from southern Syria, northern Iraq, and Anatolia, aiming to extend his power from Syria to the Mediterranean. Back at Antioch, Bohemond persuaded the other Crusader leaders that if Antioch fell, he would keep it for himself, and an Armenian commander of a section of the city's walls agreed to allow the Crusaders to enter. Bohemond and a small party entered the city on June 2, opening a gate, and at that point, horns were sounded. the city's Christian majority opened the other gates, and the Crusaders entered. In the ensuing chaos, they killed most of the Muslim inhabitants and many Christian Greeks, Syrians, and Armenians. 1 month later, the vanguard of Khalid Arslan's 40,000-strong army arrived and surrounded the Franks. From June 10, for 4 days, waves of Arslan's men attacked the city walls from dawn until dusk, having limited success. Arslan then changed tactics to starve the Crusaders out. Morale inside the city was low, and defeat looked imminent. The Franks sought terms for surrender, which were refused. On June 28, 1098, at dawn, the Franks marched out of the city in 4 battle groups to engage the enemy. The discipline of the Muslim army faltered, leading to a disorderly attack with very few casualties, and the Muslim army broke and fled. Following the battle, Bohemond asserted his claim to Antioch, but not everyone agreed, leading to a delay in the crusade for the rest of the year while the nobles argued. During this time, a plague broke out, killing many in the army. There were now even fewer horses than before, and the Muslim peasants in the area refused to supply the Crusaders with food. Simultaneously, the minor knights and soldiers became increasingly restless and threatened to continue to Jerusalem without their squabbling leaders. Finally, at the beginning of 1099, the march restarted, leaving Bohemond behind as the first prince of Antioch. Proceeding down the Mediterranean coast, the Crusaders encountered little resistance, as local rulers preferred to make peace with them and provide supplies rather than fight. The Crusader forces began to grow, with Robert Curthose and Tancred agreeing to become vassals. The Crusaders then initiated a siege of Arca, a city in northern Lebanon, on February 14, 1099. During the siege, the situation was tense among the military leaders, as there had been no real leader of the crusade, leading to struggles for power. The siege of Arca lasted until May 13, when the Crusaders left having captured nothing. By this time, the Fatimids had recaptured Jerusalem from the Seljuks and attempted to make a deal with the Crusaders, promising freedom of passage to any pilgrims to the Holy Land on the condition that the Crusaders did not advance into their domains. This offer was rejected by the Fatimid governor of Jerusalem, Iftikhar al-Dawla, who was well aware of the Crusaders' intentions and expelled all of Jerusalem's Christian inhabitants. On June 7, the Crusaders reached Jerusalem, and many wept upon seeing the city they had journeyed so long to reach. Their arrival revealed an arid countryside lacking in water or food supplies, with no prospect of relief. By the time the Crusader army reached Jerusalem, it was estimated that only about 12,000 men, including 1,500 cavalry, remained. There was no hope of blockading the city as they had at Antioch. Instead, they resolved to take the city by assault. While Godfrey and Tancred made camp to the north of the city, Raymond set up to the south. Thank you for joining us for 1099 Historical Battle for Jerusalem.